In a quiet suburban neighborhood where tree-lined streets offered the illusion of peace and harmony, an unspeakable crime would soon send shockwaves through the community. On the surface, everything seemed idyllic. This was the kind of place where families attended barbecues together, children played in the parks until sunset, and everyone knew each other's name. Yet, beneath this picture-perfect setting lurked a secret so dark it would shatter lives forever. Sarah, a 34-year-old Christian woman, had lived in this neighborhood for nearly a decade. She was a regular at church on Sundays, a friendly face at the local bakery, and someone who appeared to embody the values of her faith. Ahmed, her next-door neighbor, was a devout Muslim, 42 years old, and the father of two young children. He was equally respected in the community, known for his generosity and calm demeanor. To outsiders, Sarah and Ahmed had little in common besides a property line. But what no one could have guessed was that these two neighbors were bound by a secret that would unravel in the most chilling way. It all began innocently enough. Sarah often exchanged friendly greetings with Ahmed as they watered their gardens or collected their mail. Small talk about the weather turned into longer conversations, and before long, their casual chats became the highlight of Sarah's day. Ahmed, juggling work and family life, found solace in Sarah's company. She was kind, attentive, and offered an escape from the pressures of his responsibilities. But what started as a harmless friendship soon crossed boundaries neither of them had anticipated. The turning point came one rainy afternoon. Sarah had noticed Ahmed standing on his porch, looking unusually tense. She invited him in for a cup of tea, a gesture she framed as neighborly kindness. Inside her cozy living room, away from prying eyes, their conversation grew more personal. Ahmed confided in Sarah about the challenges he faced at home, including the strain in his marriage. Sarah listened intently, offering comfort and validation. For Ahmed, who was bound by cultural and religious expectations, this emotional outlet felt intoxicating. For Sarah, it was something else entirely, an opening to a connection she had been craving. Over the weeks that followed, their relationship deepened. Late-night texts turned into secret meetings, and their shared moments became charged with an unspoken tension. Ahmed wrestled with guilt, knowing his actions went against his faith and commitment to his wife. Sarah, however, saw their relationship as a form of destiny, a love story that transcended barriers. But as their affair grew more intense, so did the risks. In a close-knit community like theirs, secrets were hard to keep. Ahmed became increasingly paranoid, fearing that his family or someone from the mosque would discover his betrayal. He tried to distance himself from Sarah, but her response was not what he expected. Instead of accepting his withdrawal, Sarah clung to him more desperately. Her infatuation turned into obsession, and she began to see Ahmed not just as a lover, but as someone she couldn't live without. This obsession drove Sarah to take dangerous steps to keep Ahmed close. She started showing up at places where she knew he'd be, under the guise of coincidence. She left him notes and small gifts, actions that Ahmed found increasingly unnerving. He tried to end the affair several times, but each time Sarah managed to pull him back, using emotional manipulation and veiled threats about revealing their secret. Then came the breaking point. Ahmed, consumed by guilt and fear, told Sarah that he could no longer continue the affair. He planned to confess to his wife, beg for her forgiveness, and rebuild his family. For Sarah, this was a betrayal of the highest order. She had sacrificed so much, her moral values, her reputation, and her sense of self, for a man who now wanted to abandon her. The thought of losing him was unbearable, and in her mind, there was only one way to ensure that he stayed in her life, or, at the very least, that he couldn't leave her for good. As the tension between them escalated, Sarah's behavior became increasingly erratic. Friends and neighbors began to notice subtle changes in her demeanor. Her once warm smile now seemed strained, and she avoided the casual chats she used to enjoy. Ahmed, too, appeared distracted and withdrawn, but no one could have guessed the turmoil brewing beneath the surface. Then, one fateful evening, Ahmed disappeared. His family reported him missing after he failed to come home from work. Panic spread through the community as search efforts began. For days, volunteers combed through nearby woods and parks, while police questioned neighbors, including Sarah. She appeared visibly shaken during the interview, but her account of the last time she had seen Ahmed matched what others had said. She seemed like just another concerned neighbor, but behind closed doors, Sarah was unraveling. She knew what had happened to Ahmed, and the weight of her secret was becoming too much to bear. The affair she had once believed was her greatest love had now turned into her darkest nightmare. What had started as a forbidden romance had spiraled into obsession, betrayal, and murder. The chilling details of how this love affair ended in tragedy would leave everyone asking the same question. How could a woman like Sarah, who seemed so ordinary, commit such an extraordinary crime? And what does this story reveal about the lengths people will go to protect their secrets? Sarah and Ahmed's relationship had started as an innocent friendship, one that neither of them could have foreseen turning into something so destructive. It began with small exchanges, compliments about Ahmed's well-tended garden or Sarah's knack for decorating her front porch. Living next door to one another in a quiet neighborhood, they saw each other almost daily. Ahmed, balancing work, family, and his commitments to the local mosque, often found himself unwinding during brief conversations with Sarah. She was friendly and engaging, offering a listening ear that quickly became a comfort. Sarah, on the other hand, was lonely. She had been divorced for several years and lived alone. While she attended church regularly and had a small circle of acquaintances, she lacked the deep, personal connections she craved. Ahmed's presence filled that void. At first, she was drawn to his kindness and the genuine way he listened to her. Slowly, she realized her feelings for him were becoming more than neighborly. The pivotal moment came one evening, when a power outage plunged their neighborhood into darkness. Ahmed, checking on his neighbors, knocked on Sarah's door to ensure she was all right. She invited him in, lighting a few candles to brighten her living room. The atmosphere, dimly lit and intimate, felt charged in a way neither of them acknowledged out loud. They talked for hours, sharing personal stories and laughing more freely than they ever had before. When Ahmed finally left, Sarah found herself replaying the night in her mind, wondering if he had felt the same spark she did. For Ahmed, the encounter was unsettling. As a married man deeply rooted in his faith, he recognized the potential danger of their growing connection. But he also couldn't deny how easy it was to talk to Sarah, how much lighter he felt in her presence. At first, he convinced himself it was harmless, a friendship that provided a break from the pressures of his daily life. Yet, as their interactions grew more frequent, he started to notice the subtle ways Sarah seemed to draw him in. Their casual chats soon turned into longer, more secretive meetings. Ahmed would drop by Sarah's house under the guise of borrowing a tool or discussing neighborhood issues, but their conversations would inevitably drift to more personal topics. Sarah shared details about her divorce and the loneliness she felt, while Ahmed confided in her about the challenges he faced in his marriage. His wife, a deeply religious woman, had grown distant over the years, focusing more on their children and less on their relationship. Sarah listened intently, offering sympathy and understanding in a way that Ahmed found intoxicating. The shift from emotional intimacy to physical attraction happened gradually. One evening, after a particularly intense conversation about Ahmed's marital struggles, Sarah leaned in and kissed him. He pulled away at first, startled by the realization of what was happening. But as she apologized and began to cry, Ahmed felt a mix of guilt and compassion that clouded his judgment. He kissed her back, crossing a line he had sworn never to approach. From that moment, their affair began in earnest. They met whenever they could, always careful to avoid arousing suspicion. Ahmed would tell his wife he had errands to run or work obligations, while Sarah kept her blinds closed to avoid nosy neighbors. They communicated through discreet messages, their texts filled with declarations of affection and promises to be together. For Sarah, this was the passionate connection she had always dreamed of. For Ahmed, it was an exhilarating escape from the confines of his responsibilities. But the thrill of secrecy couldn't last forever. As their relationship deepened, so did the risks. Ahmed became increasingly paranoid, fearing someone from the mosque or his wife's circle of friends might notice his unusual behavior. He began to feel the weight of his betrayal, not just to his wife, but to his faith and community. Every time he left Sarah's house, he was consumed by guilt, praying for forgiveness and vowing to end the affair. But whenever he tried, Sarah would plead with him to stay, reminding him of how much they meant to each other. Sarah's attachment to Ahmed grew more intense with each passing day. She had never felt this deeply for anyone before, and the thought of losing him was unbearable. She started to envision a future where they could be together openly, convincing herself that Ahmed loved her enough to leave his wife and children. But when she brought up the idea, Ahmed's reaction was not what she expected. He became distant, avoiding her calls and making excuses to cut their meetings short. One evening, after weeks of tension, Ahmed finally told Sarah the truth. He couldn't continue the affair. He explained that his guilt was eating him alive, that he wanted to repair his marriage and focus on his family. For him, this was the only path forward. But for Sarah, it felt like a cruel betrayal. She had risked everything for Ahmed, her reputation, her values, and her sense of self, all for him to abandon her when things became complicated. The conversation escalated into a heated argument, with Sarah accusing Ahmed of using her and throwing her aside. Ahmed, trying to remain calm, apologized repeatedly but stood firm in his decision. When he left that night, Sarah was left devastated and consumed by rage. She couldn't imagine her life without Ahmed, and the thought of him returning to his wife while she was left to pick up the pieces was too much to bear. In the days that followed, Sarah's obsession with Ahmed grew darker. She began to monitor his movements, looking for opportunities to confront him. She sent him messages, alternating between pleas for reconciliation and veiled threats about exposing their affair. Ahmed, terrified of the consequences, tried to appease her while maintaining his distance. But Sarah's desperation only intensified. One evening, Sarah discovered that Ahmed was planning to confess everything to his wife, hoping to salvage his marriage. This revelation pushed her over the edge. In her mind, Ahmed's confession would not only destroy any chance of them being together, but also ruin her reputation in the community. She couldn't let that happen. If Ahmed was determined to cut her out of his life, she would ensure he could never betray her again. Sarah invited Ahmed over under the pretense of wanting closure. Reluctantly, he agreed, hoping to end things on a peaceful note. But when he arrived, the atmosphere was tense. Sarah seemed calmer than he expected, offering him tea and engaging in small talk. Ahmed, uneasy but determined to stay polite, tried to steer the conversation toward their goodbyes. What happened next would forever change their lives and the lives of everyone around them. Ahmed had gone to Sarah's house that evening with every intention of ending their relationship for good. He had decided to be honest, to tell her that their affair had been a mistake, and to ask her to let him move on with his life. But Sarah had other plans. As Ahmed stepped into Sarah's living room, he noticed the dim lighting and an eerie sense of calm that unsettled him. She had set the table with 2 cups of tea and invited him to sit. Despite the warmth of the gesture, Ahmed felt a gnawing unease. Sarah's demeanor was oddly composed, a stark contrast to the emotional pleas and anger she had displayed in their last few interactions. The conversation began politely enough, with Sarah asking about his family and work. Ahmed, trying to stay on neutral ground, answered briefly and avoided her gaze. After a few minutes, Sarah leaned forward, her voice soft but heavy with meaning. "Ahmed," she said, "I've been thinking a lot about everything. About us. I know you're struggling, but I can't just let go without understanding why." Ahmed sighed, rubbing his hands together nervously. "Sarah, I've told you already. I can't do this anymore. It's not right. For you, for me, for my family. I need to focus on fixing my mistakes." Her expression darkened slightly, the calm mask beginning to slip. "Mistakes?" she echoed, her voice trembling. "Is that what I was to you? A mistake?" "No, that's not what I mean," Ahmed replied quickly, realizing his words had hurt her. "You're not a mistake, but what we did was. I can't keep living a lie. It's tearing me apart." Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but they didn't spill over. She stared at him for a long moment before standing up abruptly and pacing the room. You don't understand, Ahmed, she said, her voice rising. I gave you everything. I put my heart and my soul into into us. And now you're telling me it was all meaningless? Ahmed stood as well, trying to calm her. Sarah, please listen to me. I never wanted to hurt you, but this has to stop. For both our sakes. She turned to face him, her expression shifting from heartbreak to something colder, sharper. For both our sakes, she repeated bitterly. Or just for yours? Because it seems like you're willing to throw me away, as long as you get to save yourself. Ahmed took a step back, sensing the conversation was spiraling out of control. This isn't about throwing you away. It's about doing what's right. Sarah's voice dropped to a whisper, but the intensity behind it was chilling. And what's right, Ahmed? Walking away from me? Pretending none of this ever happened? Leaving me to pick up the pieces of the life you destroyed? Before Ahmed could respond, Sarah moved closer, her tone shifting again. This time, almost pleading. Don't do this. Don't leave me like this. We can figure it out. We can be together, Ahmed. I know we can. But Ahmed shook his head firmly. No, Sarah, we can't. It's over. Something in her seemed to snap. Her face hardened, and she stepped back, her hands trembling. Over? She said almost to herself. No, it's not over. Not until I say it is. In a blur of motion, Sarah grabbed a heavy object from the nearby table, a metal candlestick. Ahmed barely had time to react before she struck him across the head with it. He stumbled backward, dazed, and fell to the floor. Blood trickled from the wound, but he was still conscious, groaning in pain. Sarah stood over him, breathing heavily, the candlestick still clutched in her hand. I didn't want it to come to this, she muttered, more to herself than to him. But you forced me. You made me do this. Ahmed tried to crawl away, his vision blurry and his movements sluggish. Sarah, stop, he pleaded weakly. You don't have to do this. But her mind was already made up. In her twisted logic, this was the only way to ensure he couldn't leave her or betray her secret. She raised the candlestick again and brought it down with brutal force, silencing him forever. For a moment, there was only silence. Sarah stood over Ahmed's lifeless body, her chest heaving as she tried to process what she had just done. The reality of the situation began to sink in, but instead of panic, she felt a strange sense of calm. She had done what she had to do. Now, she just needed to make sure no one ever found out. Sarah dragged Ahmed's body into the kitchen, her mind racing. She wrapped him in a large plastic sheet she found under the sink, tying it tightly with duct tape. Then, under the cover of darkness, she loaded his body into the trunk of her car and drove to a secluded wooded area several miles away. There, she dug a shallow grave and buried him, making sure to cover the site with leaves and branches. She disposed of the candlestick and other evidence in a nearby river, hoping the current would carry them away. By the time she returned home, the sun was beginning to rise. She cleaned her house meticulously, scrubbing away every trace of what had happened. For the next few days, Sarah went about her life as if nothing had happened. When Ahmed's wife reported him missing, Sarah acted concerned, even joining the neighborhood search parties to look for him. She answered police questions calmly, explaining that she hadn't seen Ahmed in days. But, as the investigation progressed, cracks began to appear in her story. Ahmed's phone records showed multiple calls and messages between him and Sarah, raising suspicions. A neighbor also came forward, saying they had seen Ahmed entering Sarah's house the night he disappeared. The police obtained a search warrant for Sarah's home, where they found traces of blood on the living room carpet. DNA tests confirmed it belonged to Ahmed. Under mounting pressure, Sarah finally confessed, recounting her version of events in an attempt to justify her actions. During her trial, Sarah's defense team argued that she had acted out of desperation and emotional distress, claiming Ahmed had manipulated her. But the prosecution painted a different picture, one of a woman so consumed by obsession that she was willing to kill to keep her secret. In the end, the jury found Sarah guilty of murder. She was sentenced to life in prison, leaving two families shattered by her actions. The quiet neighborhood where the crime had unfolded was never the same. Ahmed's wife and children moved away, unable to bear the memories of what had happened. And Sarah's name became synonymous with betrayal and tragedy, a reminder of how far someone could fall when consumed by obsession and despair. This was not just the story of a forbidden affair gone wrong. It was a cautionary tale about the consequences of secrets, lies, and the lengths some people will go to protect what they cannot have.